In 1987, a couple awoke to find a masked man standing at the foot of their bed. Calm and collected, he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out 4 pairs of handcuffs, then ordered them to lie on their stomachs and restrain both their wrists and ankles. Once they were bound, the intruder left the room and walked down the hallway, where he gently woke their 7-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter. Escorting the children back to the master bedroom, he announced that this was just a robbery and began demanding clothes, money, and food. The parents had no choice but to comply. He taped their mouth shut and blindfolded the kids before shoving the parents into their wardrobe and barricaded it with nearby furniture. In an unusual move, he used the family's bedroom phone to make a call, but investigators would later learn this was a carefully crafted distraction. The horror deepened when he took the daughter to another room and assaulted her. Afterwards, in a chillingly methodical act, he bathed her, scrubbing away any trace of evidence. With the crime complete, the intruder casually raided the family's leftovers, drank some milk, and disappeared into the night. This was only the beginning. The man would become known as Mr. Cruel, a figure linked to multiple attacks, all carried out with terrifying precision. Despite decades of investigation, the case remains cold.
And have you ever wondered why we had so many insane asylums back in the day? I have, and I don't think it's because we were overwhelmed with insane people. I think it's because of something else entirely. Look at these magnificent buildings that the insane asylums were all around the world. This is the Napa, California Insane Asylum, supposedly built in 1875 when the population was just 5,000 in Napa. So really, they needed this massive building for insane people? So were the insane asylums built because we were overwhelmed with insane people, or was it because the people who run the world needed to do a reset and they couldn't quite do that reset if there was people still around who remembered what the world was like before the reset? Here is an article about the treatment of lunatics, and it says, lunatics had their golden age before laws were made, when they wandered forth at large and were revered as saints or as partaking of something holy or divine. But with laws and civilization, their iron age began. And here's also some art from around that time frame depicting repopulation. I'm sure it's all just a joke and just a coincidence. I'm not saying there was a great reset, a repopulation event, or a timeline shift. I'm just saying there's some interesting things we didn't quite learn in history class. And maybe some of the people they locked up in these insane asylums weren't so crazy after all. Let me know what you think.
Scientists kept people awake for 15 days in something known as the Russian sleep experiment, but after day 9, it became so disturbing they tried to shut the experiment down. In the 1940s, researchers put 5 people inside of a chamber and they would pump a special kind of gas that would prevent them from falling asleep, and if they were able to last the full 15 days, they would be released. At first, everything seemed normal. They talked, laughed, and acted like nothing was wrong. But after a few days, their behavior started to change. They stopped interacting with each other and started whispering into these microphones like they didn't want the others to hear what they were saying. And suddenly, complete silence. Days went by with no sound at all. By day 9, the silence broke and they started to scream uncontrollably for hours until their voice gave out. And then silence again because they didn't want the gas turned off. When researchers finally looked inside the chamber, they couldn't believe what they saw. The subjects were still alive, but they didn't look like humans anymore. Their bodies were severely deteriorated, their eyes were hollow, and some of them had ruined their own skin to the point where they looked unrecognizable. The room was destroyed, food hadn't been touched in days, and they didn't want to leave the chamber. When scientists tried to remove them, one of the subjects told them, "We are what you hide from when you go to sleep."
The police sketch haunted me as a child, but hearing the full story as an adult is even more horrifying. Before we get into today's case, if you guys do prefer deep dives, I post a brand new episode on my podcast, The Bourne Investigation, every single week. Cindy Song grew up in South Korea, but in 1995, she moved to live with her aunt and uncle in Virginia. She was an incredibly likable girl though, so she had absolutely no problems making friends and a new boyfriend, Richard, when she got to the country. It felt like she was honestly just everything that you could want to be and more. She was incredibly funny, she was a sweet girl, she was really nice to everybody, and she was also incredibly intelligent and got great grades. But her life would turn into a living nightmare on Halloween 2001. She was a very busy girl, like I said. She studied hard, she was incredibly intelligent, she was studying art at Penn State University and also working 2 jobs on the side. She deserved a break and to have some fun. Sadly, randomly out of the blue, Richard just broke up with Cindy in the September. He just broke it off out of the blue and she was really upset. She couldn't understand this, but she decided, I'm just gonna have some fun with my girls and get over it. So when she got invited to a Halloween party, she was like, perfect, this is gonna be the ideal place to let my hair down and also have a bit of a distraction. Cindy and 2 of her friends, Stacy and Lisa, showed up to the Halloween party that night and absolutely danced the night away, literally. They were dancing until about 2 a.m. and then they got invited to like an after party kind of thing. It was very low key vibe. It was almost just like playing on the PlayStation, that kind of thing. And they didn't want the night to end. They stayed there until about 4 a.m. until Stacy was like, do you know what, Cindy, I'm going to take you back home. So she dropped her off by her apartment and waved goodbye to her, not knowing that that was the last time she would ever see Cindy. The alarm was raised when everybody was suddenly like, do you know what, I've not really heard from Cindy since that party. And everyone else was like, yeah, me too. They were like, do you know what, we're probably best to actually go round to her house and see why she's not answering her phone. And honestly, that threw up even more questions than answers because it was locked and there was no sign of Cindy anywhere. Police searched the house and all that remained of Cindy inside of the flat were her fake eyelashes sat on the side. Now, us false lash wearers will know that's usually something you do right before you go to bed, right? You wouldn't like take off your eyelashes if you were then planning on going back out anywhere, would you? So where had she vanished to between taking off her eyelashes and going to bed? Surely the lashes in the flat proved that she was planning on staying in the apartment that night. There was no signs of a struggle, but her bag and phone were also inside. Chillingly, Cindy was wearing a bunny costume that night, like that was her Halloween outfit, and she hadn't managed to take it off yet, it seems, because it wasn't anywhere in the apartment. And that sent shivers down her friends' spines because there's no way in hell she comes back from the Halloween party, takes her lashes off, leaves her phone there, and goes out in her bunny costume, which kind of leaves only one haunting alternative. Now, volunteers banded together and scoured the local area, but there was absolutely no sign of the missing girl. Then something really weird happened. A few days after she'd gone missing, a call came into the police. Something had gone down in Philadelphia's Chinatown district. A young woman matching Cindy's description had been seen in or around a car with a man. It seemed like this woman was crying and shouting for help when she was abducted. Eyewitnesses called police and gave a description of the girl and the man, and it seemed to fit Cindy's description, but this image was plastered everywhere and still nobody has identified this man to this very day. And chillingly, Cindy also has never been found.
So this question is asked a lot. How are the trans community treated in prison? So the short answer is they automatically go to protective custody. And protective custody is very hard to get in Florida. And what I mean by that is you literally have to get beaten half to death, raped. I mean, there has to be physical proof, and they'll send you to protective custody. I mean, I've seen a million times where guys will run up to the window saying someone's going to kill me, and they'll literally shut the window and say, or the little flap they talking to, turn their back on the inmate, and the inmate ends up getting stabbed to death. I mean, officers will put snitches on blast. I mean, it's a fucking disgusting world on the inside. But for the trans community, what was happening was you got guys in there that have been in prison 10, 20, 30 years. And some of them are booty bandit, rapist, piece of shits. And with them having that predator nature, when the trans community started making more and more of the population in prison, they were getting raped, they were getting beat, they had a hard time. So when PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, was finally put, in prison, they automatically put them in protective custody because they were literally getting victimized crazy. I mean, it doesn't matter your sexual orientation, your race, your religion. No one deserves to be victimized. The only people that truly deserve are the ones that hurt women and children in the most disgusting ways possible, then yeah, they deserve to get it. I don't care who you are or what you are. But it wasn't right, because the trans community was literally just getting taken advantage of to the fullest degree. And the guards would laugh at it. To them it was funny. And then it got out of hand. So automatically, if you're from the trans community and you go to a man's prison, they're going to send you directly to protective custody. And even in protective custody, they still have to be careful, because prison is nothing but predators. Whether they're looking for free food, free drugs, or they're just straight sexual predators. It's everywhere you go. Everywhere you look. It's just filled with either warriors or victims. And they had a real hard time before, things were changed and policies were changed. And it sucks that, a lot of times in life, you have to go through suffering and pain and violence and bloodshed for there to be any type of needle moved. But all in all, they go to protective custody. But even in there, there's predators. That's the dangers of prison. It's nothing but warriors and victims. And it's just a cruel world. Stay out, stay free. Us.
I just saw a gentleman claim that he was on the Ellen DeGeneres show because he was a child prodigy chess player, and that just after he got off set, he looks to his right and sees Ellen's dressing room door open. It was open just enough that he can see her manually dislocating her jaw and bodying an entire Gelson's rotisserie chicken in one gulp. She then turned and looked at him and hissed. He sprinted all the way to his dressing room and tried to tell his mom, but she didn't believe him. And I'm pretty sure that's not the first time somebody has told a similar story about Ellen DeGeneres. And a lot of people in the comments are saying, are you sure that was a rotisserie chicken? Let me know what you think in the comments.
She was murdered by her boyfriend as part of a bet. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Rebecca Aylward. When Rebecca entered into her first serious relationship, she was 13 years old and fell hard and fast for Joshua Davies. He was everything that Rebecca ever wanted in a boyfriend, and she thought the absolute world of him. One weekend, Joshua had spent a couple of nights sleeping over at Rebecca's house, spending time with her family, laughing, playing games, and having a great time. He would even tell Rebecca that it was one of the best weekends that he had ever had, and the couple seemed so happy and so in love. So when he returned back home and abruptly broke up with Rebecca, she wasn't just heartbroken and devastated, she was extremely confused. After this, Joshua's entire demeanour towards Rebecca completely changed. It did a 360. He began to mercilessly bully her. He would spread rumours about her throughout the school. He called her absolutely horrible names, and it really seemed that he had developed this deep anger and hatred towards her out of absolutely nowhere for no reason whatsoever. This got so bad that Rebecca even expressed to some of her friends that she started feeling scared of Josh. She worried that he wanted to kill her. Meanwhile, as he is relentlessly bullying Rebecca, Josh is openly telling his friends all the different ways that he would love to kill her, including saying that he wanted to push her off a bridge. When he was saying all of this stuff, none of Joshua's friends took him seriously. They thought that he was just expressing his anger, his very clear hatred towards Rebecca, and never thought in a million years that he would actually act upon them threats. Every Saturday morning, Joshua and his group of friends would all meet in a local cafe, and they would all sit and have breakfast together. One Saturday, Joshua met up with all his friends at this cafe and started going on his usual tangent of how much he hated Rebecca, he wanted to kill her, and he was going to kill her. Him going on these very long tangents became almost a running joke within the friendship group, and they would always laugh it off. On this day though, the mood shifted, and one of the boys said to Joshua that he would make him a bet. If he went through with killing Rebecca, that boy would reward him by buying him a breakfast. This friend maybe had no idea that Josh was fully planning on murdering Rebecca, and for him, he almost used this bet as a motivation. That was the thing that was going to give him the push. On Friday, the 22nd of October 2010, Joshua texts Rebecca completely unexpectedly out of the blue. Within the text messages, he's implying to Rebecca that he not only wants to meet up and make up, but that he wants to reconcile. He wants to get back together with her, despite all of his disgusting behaviour over the past period of time. All of the bullying, all of the rumours, and all of the name calling, Rebecca was overjoyed at the thought of getting back with Joshua. This made her so happy. Like I said earlier, she thought the absolute world of him. They planned to meet the next day, and Rebecca was so excited. She got herself all dressed up, wearing some new clothes, she put some makeup on, and she styled her hair. They had initially planned to meet at a local park, but then last minute Josh decided to change the location and decided to meet her at a village. Rebecca was already at the park, and so as she started walking to the village, she is talking on the phone to her mum. At around about 5 p.m, Rebecca's auntie contacts Rebecca's mum, and she's telling her something alarming. She can't get in touch with Rebecca. Immediately, this was setting off all of the alarm bells, because what do you mean you can't get in touch with Rebecca? She was a very responsible young woman who almost never ever let her phone die and would always respond to her text messages, especially from family. Rebecca's mum tried contacting some of her friends to see if any of them were with Rebecca, but each and every person she spoke to said no, they weren't with Rebecca and they didn't know where she was. After contacting every single person that they could think of and physically driving around their local area looking for Rebecca and still seeing no sign of her, at 9 p.m, she was reported missing to the police. News of her disappearance spread fast and it was all over social media. This is how one of Joshua's friends got wind that Rebecca had gone missing. He was immediately suspicious of Joshua, and this friend confided in his parents that he thought Rebecca could be missing and had been harmed at the hands of Joshua Davies. They contacted the police and this friend told them everything that he knew. Following the tip, the police went to a nearby woodland, and that is where they found the deceased body of 15-year-old Rebecca Aylward lay face down in some undergrowth. Rebecca's cause of death would be ruled as being from brain injuries. She had had her skull smashed in. Very quickly, Joshua Davies was arrested under suspicion of murder. Upon hearing the news of Joshua's arrest, Rebecca's mum initially could not believe it. She couldn't believe that this young boy who seemed so happy and so in love with her daughter could have been capable of doing something like this. But she would soon learn that that wasn't who he really was. Police interviewed a lot of Rebecca's friends and they asked each and every one the same question: who would want to harm Rebecca? And each of them named the same person: Joshua Davies. What we now know is that with full intentions of murdering Rebecca, Joshua lured her into the woods. He initially tried to snap her neck, but in his words, it's harder than you think. When Rebecca realised what was happening, that she was in very real danger, she tried to sprint away from Joshua, screaming out for help, and that is when he pursued her. He picked up a large rock and struck her over the head with it over and over and over until she was well past dead. A search of his phone would uncover that just days before the murder, he texted that friend that made him the bet saying, quote, "Don't say anything, but you might just owe me your breakfast," proving that this murder was planned and premeditated. Joshua's trial began at Swansea Crown Court in July of 2011. During testimony, one friend that was testifying stated that after Joshua killed Rebecca, he took this friend into the woodland to look at her dead body. On the 27th of July, Joshua Davies would be found guilty of the murder of Rebecca Aylward. He was handed a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum of 14 years to serve. As of right now, he is eligible for release.
In late June 2008, a father and his 21-year-old son were on an extended fishing trip in central Brazil. Now, these two were not just out there for fun. What they would do is they would go out for a week or so, they would go camping next to a river, they would go fishing in that river, and they would catch as many bait fish as they possibly could, and then they would bring those fish back to town and sell those to fishermen or tourists, again, to use as bait. And that's how these two made their living. Well, either way, this trip was going really well. For the first 3 days, they caught a lot of fish, but on day number 4, something went horribly wrong. It was the end of the day, it was getting really dark out, and they had caught a lot of fish, but apparently it was not enough to satisfy Dad. And he told his son that he was going to go back down to the river and try and do just a little bit more fishing, try and squeeze out the last little bit of daylight to try and catch a few more fish. And son was like, okay, but he was tuckered out. He was tired. They'd been fishing all day. And so son, he said he was just going to stay back at camp and he was just going to go to sleep. And so son, he crawled into their tent, and that's exactly what he did. He just went in there and went to bed. Well, Dad, he made his way down to the river and he fished for about a half an hour longer until it was completely dark out and he couldn't fish anymore. And so he gathered up his gear and he got his flashlight and he started to make his way back to camp. Well, presumably around this same time, son would have been sleeping in the tent at the campsite. And again, presumably, son would have heard something entering into his tent. And he probably would have thought that it was just his dad coming back from fishing. But it wasn't his dad. Well, Dad, he comes walking up the trail and he gets to the campsite and he's shining his flashlight all around. And then all of a sudden he freezes because the light of his flashlight comes to rest upon their tent. And their tent is completely torn to shreds and there's stuff strewn all over the place. And then the light illuminates blood. And there's a lot of blood. And so Dad, he starts yelling for his son and he goes running up to the tent trying to find his boy, but there's no response whatsoever. And so Dad, he's shining his flashlight all through the jungle trying to see any sign of his son, and then he freezes again because the light from his flashlight comes to rest on 2 glowing yellow eyes. And they are the eyes of a 250-pound male jaguar. And in this jaguar's mouth is the body of his son. His son is not making any noise. He's not moving. He's just limp. But Dad, he goes absolutely berserk. He starts picking up rocks and sticks and he charges at this thing, throwing rocks and sticks at this cat. But the cat just immediately turns around with his son still in its mouth and goes running into the jungle. Dad, he goes chasing after it for a little while, but he knows he's not going to catch up with this thing. So he runs back to camp and he grabs their radio that they have and he radios some nearby fishermen who are at campsites about 10 minutes away. And so like 10 minutes later, all these different fishermen, they start showing up and eventually they form this search and rescue party. And all of them, they get online and they go walking into the jungle. And immediately they pick up a heavy blood trail. And they follow that trail only about 60 meters into the jungle. And that's when they come upon the body of the man's son. And this cat had clearly been predating on him. It had been consuming him. The entire left side of the young man's face was missing. Parts of his arms were missing. Parts of his torso were missing. Parts of his legs were missing. There was parts of him missing all over the place. Now, what's weird about this case is it is very well documented. Like the events that happened are well documented and the aftermath is well documented. There are coroner pictures of the entire thing. There are official government and police reports about the whole thing. But it doesn't ever disclose, at least that I could find, what the young man's name was or what his father's name was. And I don't know why that's the case. Normally in my stories, I try and make sure to honor the people and let you know who they were. But in this case, we know that it happened, but I cannot tell you specifically, like I said, his name. But I would advise you to probably not look up the pictures. They're easy to find on the internet, but it's pretty gruesome.
So I used to clean houses that people wouldn't stay in anymore, and it wasn't like hoarder houses, it was worse. It was the kind of houses that were just left as is, like somebody left and never came back. So a small company would get contracts for abandoned properties, and we would go in, we would deep clean, stage the homes, and sell them like nothing ever happened. Most of the time, it was obvious why people would leave the house. Bad energy, mold, lots of damage. But there was one house we came across, and it was completely normal, like too normal. Everything was still there. Clothes were folded. There was a glass of water on the nightstand. Dishes were put away. It was like somebody paused midday and then never unpaused. So it was just my job to go in, clean it, and report if anything was off or unusual. And at first, nothing was until I made it to the hallway. There were photos that were lining the wall, and it was all of the same person. Different outfits, different places, but she was doing the same thing in all of them. She was staring directly at the camera, not smiling, just staring. I didn't think very much of it until I went to go and clean the bathroom, and I was wiping down the foggy streaks off the mirror, and I found that there was some writing underneath it. Not on top, but underneath, like it had been written a long time ago. And it said in all caps, "Don't let her see you see her." I stepped back really fast, and I kind of just admired what I just looked at. I tried to just tell myself it was a prank, something funny, haha, something written a long time ago. I kept working, and then later on I went back into the hallway, and I noticed something. The pictures in the hallway were totally different. Same woman, same outfits, same places, all of that was the same, except for one thing: she was not staring directly into the camera anymore. She was looking off to the side, like she was staring at something else, and I felt sick. I slowly turned to look at whatever her eyes were aiming at, and I looked back at her again, and then her eyes again were back at the camera, staring straight at me, and this time the pictures were different. They were closer, like it looked like it was zoomed in a little bit more. So I grabbed all of my things and I ran to the front door to leave. The handle was moving, but it was not opening, and then I heard something behind me, a little footstep in the carpet, and then I heard a little quiet whisper. I didn't turn around, I just sat there trying to breathe, and the whisper said, "Don't look unless you want to stay." Somehow, I got the door open. Next thing you know, I'm outside. I ran, and about a week later, I got my final paycheck. But with that envelope of money, I also got a printed picture that I saw, and it was a picture of me, and the picture was me not looking at the camera, but I was sitting there at the front door looking back at